Hello and welcome to a CBK gaming review video. Today we are taking a look at the new Zombicide Invader by CMONGAMES. This is the latest in the Zombicide set of games, and it's set in a futuristic world, but remains similar in many aspects to Zombicide, Black Plague, Green Horde, the original. So we split these as normal into reviewing the content, the quality, the complexity, the replayability, the fun factor, and then give it an overall score. Let's jump straight into it. Let's have a look at the content. So this is the core game we're looking at. Not including any of the Kickstarter extras, although we have included some of the extras, such as the doors, the plastic extra tokens that you could buy, but we're not including Black Ops, the soldier and citizen extra figures. All that said, they add a huge amount of content to the game, but the content for the core set alone, you get a lot, and there's plenty of it.
Yeah, it's what you'd normally expect to get from one of the Zombicide games. There's plenty of boards, obviously, as normal. Both sides are printed on for variations. There's a huge number of characters to choose between.
But there's 6. The extra ones come from the extra box sets, which we're not including. We've got them on the table because we have them.
But they've all got their own special starting abilities, and you've still got the whole range of all the different figures. And yes. I mean, you've got your workers, your runners or hunters, and your tanks or fatties in Black Plague, and then you've got the Abomination. There is no Necromancer in this edition. That's dealt with slightly differently, and we'll talk about that in the complexity. So content wise, I have to give it an 8 out of 10. You do get a lot. I'd still go over 10. I'm still very happy with this. It's CMON always do well with their figures. I mean, they are very well detailed, and lots of tentacles, Cthulhu. I like it. I think there's a lot.
I agree to some degree. What I have an issue with is the card tokens. I find that the edges start to peel, and they're not particularly great. So we've always bought the plastic tokens. Now, I don't have to do that in all other games. We have chosen to do so in some games, but I almost feel it's almost mandatory for Zombicide Invader, and it just feels that there's the quality is a little bit lacking as well, and you just, it doesn't feel as if you've got as much for your money as you did with Black Plague or Green Horde.
Okay.
Well, that nicely segues into quality.
Yeah.
This was a difficult one for me. So I rate Black Plague and Green Horde rather highly. I think the quality of the components is very good. This doesn't feel as good quality. It feels perhaps a little rushed. The models, you say they've got a lot of detail. I think there is detail there. They just don't seem as good as Black Plagues or Green Hordes, and that's what I've got to mark it against. That was its own competition. Those were the previous games in the series, and I'm marking it down for that. And I give Zombicide Invader 7 out of 10 for its quality. Now, that's still a good score. Don't get me wrong. This is still a good game, but in comparison to its previous games, I don't feel it is as strong as they are. There has been some design choices that I don't necessarily like. You say about the tentacles on all the monsters, making it rather Cthulhian. That makes them a nightmare to get on the board.
It does.
And put in the room and move. And
they do tend to get tangled
yes.
up with each other. So when you've got a room full and you've killed one, you can pick up one figure and then another 2 or 3 come with it. So yes, I do mark it down a little bit for that. But
I'm not trying to. I'm trying to be very fair and give a fair reasoning behind the scores that I'm giving it, and I just cannot give it a higher score than 7. Okay. I still say that's a good score. But.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still going to stick with 9 because I still really like the figures, and yes, it's annoying when they do get sort of caught together, but I still think they're well made. I'm happy with it.
That's fine. Moving on to the complexity. So it's Zombicide. You know what you're getting. The rules are similar enough to the previous games that it is familiar, but different enough that it is its own game, and that's fantastic.
I mean, they've got the core parts of you still have 3 actions and you still have to do similar actions each time, but then you've got things like the mould that comes in, which completely changes the game.
So the mould, we mentioned the necromancers previously. In the previous iterations, Black Plague and Green Horde, when a necromancer was on the board, extra spawn points would be created. You'd get more zombies on the board. There was some lose conditions when those zombies got off, so the necromancers got off the board, that would result in those spawn points becoming permanent spawn points. And if you killed a necromancer, you could choose which spawn point to remove. I quite like that because you could have some quite tactical play.
Yeah.
That's not in this iteration. Instead, the abominations leave, or the spoiler abomination leaves behind mould, which on some of the spawn tokens, spawn cards, would generate some of the aliens.
They're coming up out of the
mould. And that actually works really, really well.
But also, when it appears in a room, it breaks down the walls of that room.
Yes.
So suddenly you've got different entrances and exits, which puts a new slant on it. Whereas before it was the necromancers right the way down this corridor and round the corner. How are we going to kill it? Suddenly now the mould appears and it's once I've dealt with the abomination, I can get straight through to that room where the objective is. So there's...
Yes.
Yeah. There's a different gameplay in style at times.
It does. The lose condition changes as well. So if 2 spawn points are joined by the mould, then you lose the game. Yeah. So you have to keep an eye on it. There's only one way to get rid of the mould, and that's flamethrower, which needs canisters, which is similar to the mechanic of the Dragon Bile and the torch in the previous games.
They've increased the sort of want to search, whereas in sort of Black Plague and Green Horde, we've searched to upgrade a couple of weapons and then just carried on with the mission. Whereas this one, because you've got the canisters and on some weapons it's a 1 use only for the canister, you tend to do a lot more searches throughout the whole game, which I find makes it a bit more interesting at times.
They've also changed the search mechanic, which I really like. What they have done is made it so that civilians can search anywhere indoors, unless there is mould there. So the more mould, the less opportunity you have to search. Soldiers, however, can only search in military locations, and they're marked in a red zone. So if you lose those precious rooms and you've got soldiers, they may not be able to search. So they're reliant on the civilians getting them the items that they need to fight for you. And I quite like that. We played this with 7 players, almost the second or third time we played it, with some friends. We had a friend down, Joel, down from up north, and we had a couple of our normal gaming guys around, and it was a really good laugh. And 7 players, it worked really well. It scaled really well, and it was difficult. I made it slightly too difficult because I'd misread some of the rules, but that was fine.
Yeah.
The rules.
Also, we did learn to go outside. You now have to find oxygen canisters, which are only available in certain rooms. And as we found in Black Plague, don't open a door on the last turn of your go, otherwise whatever spawns in that room you can't deal with. Don't search in the oxygen room on the last turn, because if you end up with mould, you've lost sort of the access to your oxygen tanks. So there's nice little bits in there because you don't have the door element.
That was I believe that was a mistake. I think we pulled a spoiler abomination card rather than a search card. So I don't think that's something you necessarily have to worry about.
No, but
we did make some error. We made a few mistakes.
There's little bits in there.
But there are some surprises in here. As I said, the gameplay, if you've played Zombicide before, you'll be able to play this straight away. There's some name changes to some of the skills, but they pretty much make sense. Yeah. There's a few differences. Obviously, there's more missile and ranged combat. There's a lot more sound being generated by gunfire, and that becomes, again, changes some of the way that the monsters move. Overall complexity, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Yeah. It's not that complex. It's very easy. To me, this is a gateway game that you could take to friends who don't game very often or don't game at all, and they would enjoy themselves. Yeah. And I think it's a good game to get people interested in the hobby.
Yeah, I agree with an 8. Yeah.
For me, that Zombicide is about that. It's about bringing people into the hobby. So moving on to replayability. You do get a number of missions in the book, and one of the things that people are very good at on the internet, there's plenty of different missions being generated, and that always increases the replayability of these particular style games. Unlike in Zombicide, Wolfsburg gave extra adventures. Yeah. It gave extra board and a lot of extra different monsters. So you had the zombie wolves and the wolf abomination.
Yeah. Having the wolves put a completely different gameplay, because up until then you've got the normal moves one place or moves 2 places. Yes. Suddenly the wolves are moving 3, so you've got to think a couple extra rounds ahead. And
whilst we're not reviewing Black Ops, we want to play that a little bit more, and we want to play Dark Side more, which is again one of the games that came with this entire set. I didn't feel that it added, when we have played it, any more to this, whereas Wolfsburg and Friends and Foe and all the other expansions for including Green Horde, which I feel is an expansion, a standalone expansion, but still an expansion nonetheless for Black Plague. I don't find that with Invader. The core set is, in my opinion, all you actually need to have a really good laugh. But that means you're limited to the missions that are in the back of the manual, and whatever is going to come into the onto the internet and other people come up with. So replayability. It's a cooperative game. That always, for me, lowers the score. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah. See, I was going to go for 8 because you still do get the variance of sort of what cards are going to be drawn for the spawns, and depending on which players you've got, which abilities you've chosen as you've leveled up can sort of change it, who you're playing with the game styles, which weapons you pick. There is a lot of variety there, so it does keep the replayability quite high. But yes, you are limited to sort of the missions in the book for the maps. But I'd still say an 8 for me.
Okay. So, fun factor. I've always liked these games, and for me, it's a 9.
Yeah.
That these are games you sit down with friends. You don't take them too seriously. Some beers, takeaway or home. We like to do some home cooking, and it's a really good laugh. I'm getting a bit stale of some of these games, some of the Zombicide games. I really enjoy the fantasy setting. I really enjoy the medieval, faux medieval setting. This does have a feel of Space Hulk and Warhammer to me.
Yeah. And they've changed enough of the mechanics that it's just different enough that I still really enjoy playing it.
You mean from the Zombicide?
Yes. From Black Plague, from Green Horde to this. But moving forward, I just think
see where it goes.
Zombies
have been done to death. So is Cthulhu. I still very much like Cthulhu, the Cthulhu mythos, but I don't like all the games that are out there with it. Zombies, we'll have to see where they go with the next set of games. But there's, as we say, it's different enough to the other games. I was surprised. The door opening mechanic I thought was going to still be core to this game. Yeah. Opening a door, spawning things behind those doors. That's not the case in here. In fact, the doors are something we can use as the players to give ourselves a little bit of extra time before they're broken through by the zombie aliens. You can create kill zones with them, which we did when we had when there were 7 of us. We were using them to create sort of shunt some of the zombies into a direction of our choice, so we could take them out, and that worked quite well. So there is some interesting gameplay here. So fun factor for me is a 9.
Yeah, it's a solid 9. I think.
It's great fun. That comes to the overall score. Now, for me, with everything that I've mentioned, I'd give this a good 7. I think that's 7 out of 10. I think that's still a good score. Yeah. But I'd like to see a little bit more innovation in whatever comes next. I'd like to see a little bit of difference. But overall, it's a good, fun game.
Yeah, see, I'd go with an 8 because I love Black Plague. I really enjoy Green Horde. This has been the same for me. I was going, how different is it going to be, or is it going to be exactly the same? We sat down to play the first game, and I'm back in love with it. I've missed this, and I really like it. So it's an 8 for me for overall.
The element I really enjoy with this, as I said, is sitting down with your mates playing.
Yeah.
Again, you can have 12 players with this. If you've got the Black Ops, you've got another 6 character trays. So and there's rules to increase the difficulty depending on the number of players that you go above 6. I've never played it with 12. I don't know how that would play out. As I say, we played it with 7 and it worked very well.
Yeah.
Though I imagine you're going to get through figures quite quickly. And that there'd be extra activation, so you'd have to start planning and thinking how you're going to deal with it. Yeah. But
and I also really like. I know we're only really reviewing the core set, but I will mention that the extra figures that you can get is just brilliant. All the sort of the celebrities and the well-known people that have agreed to let them be made into characters is fantastic. Yeah. They've done really well with that. It's a great
immortalised within a board game, and yes, that is fantastic. And I think they're very good when they do that. The Kickstarter exclusives. So there's our score and our review of Zombicide Invader. Thank you for watching. if you have enjoyed, please consider liking it and consider subscribing. It's very much appreciated. We're trying to get a video out once a week. We're working on our review of Village Attacks after this. We're also looking at
Massive Darkness. Once we've had a few more, not Massive Darkness.
We've done Massive Darkness.
What am I thinking of? Edge of Darkness.
Edge of Darkness. We're going to Edge of Darkness. We've played a lot. We want to play with maximum 4 players, just to see how that changes the game.
I think that's going to change. It's definitely going to change my strategy compared to a 2-player game.
Yes.
So I want to see how it changes it before I review it.
Yeah, so that will be very soon, because we've got that. We want to play Museum once more to see. I think we've got Museum lined up to review. We played that yesterday with a friend who's a historian. Shout out to Ken. In fact, we're going to include Ken's blog post below in the details. So if you're interested in history, particularly Greek history, then check his blog out. He's a very interesting chap. What else? We're also working on the UK Games Expo 2019 discussions. We got to see quite a few very interesting games that we want to bring information to everybody about. We're going to hopefully have that up in a couple of weeks. It's been delayed due to sickness and other bits and pieces that have unfortunately delayed that. Next year we won't be as delayed on doing that. There's another game that we were going to review. We want to do U-Boat. Gloom of Kilforth, which we want to play a few more times. We always try to play games enough that we're happy to do the review.
It's sort of at least 5 times,
a minimum
to
of
understand
5 times.
And then if the game's got lots of variants in it, we want to try the different variants so we get a whole complete idea of it before we can.
So sorry, we have waffled at the end of the video, as we all want to do. Like, subscribe, follow us. If you've got any, Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, they're all over the place. There'll probably be points around here somewhere. If you have an idea for some games that you'd like to see reviewed that you haven't seen a review of, including some of the older games, we're going to start looking at some of the older games that inspired us to play games. So I very much want to do a review of Acquire, a game that I was really, my parents played to death. We played it very regularly. So we're going to look at some games like that, games that got people into board gaming, some games that people may not have even considered at this time. So thank you very much, and look forward to bringing you more videos in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.